The red sky of the alien world burned like an endless wound above the battlefield. Smoke rose from shattered machines, broken weapons, and fallen banners that once marked proud armies. The ground was scarred with deep black craters where energy weapons had struck. The wind carried the bitter smell of ash and dust, mixing with the cries of the defeated. Among the chaos, a young alien woman stumbled forward, her arms pulled roughly by the iron grip of the warrior race that had conquered her people. Her skin shimmered faintly in the glow of the burning ruins. She was from a peaceful race, known more for their songs and art than for war. Her people had never built great weapons, never trained for endless battles. And now their weakness had become their undoing. The warriors who dragged her were tall and armored in rough, jagged plates that seemed to be made of black stone. Their helmets carried horns, and their voices were deep, filled with cruel laughter. They spoke in their harsh tongue, shouting commands and mocking her fear. "Look at her," one growled. "She shakes like a leaf." Another laughed. "She will be the fire's song tonight." They brought her into the heart of their war camp, where a circle of flames already roared. The warriors had built it on purpose, long wooden beams tied together, piled with fuel, and lit to create a blazing pit. Above it, a thick metal bar stretched across, and from that bar hung chains. The alien woman's eyes widened as she understood what they planned. Her heart pounded, and though she tried to stand tall, her body trembled. Her people had taught her to remain calm, even in the face of cruelty, but the heat of the flames below her was unbearable. The warriors wasted no time. They lifted her by the arms and tied her wrists with the chains, pulling them until she hung just above the fire. The flames licked at her legs, their heat burning through her thin clothing. Smoke stung her eyes, forcing tears that blurred her vision. Around her, the warriors gathered. They shouted and clapped their armored hands together, chanting as if this was a sport for them. The alien woman struggled, twisting against the chains, but her strength was no match for their iron. She thought of her people, her village now in ruins, her family scattered or gone. She wondered if anyone had survived, if her people's songs would ever be sung again. In that moment, she felt small and powerless, a single voice about to be silenced by fire. The flames roared louder, sparks rising into the air like glowing stars. The heat scorched her skin, and she could smell the smoke filling her lungs. She coughed, struggling to breathe. One of the warriors stepped forward, lifting his spear high as the others cheered. "Tonight," he shouted, "her cries will rise with the flames, and her weakness will be burned away." The others roared in agreement, their voices echoing across the camp like thunder. They wanted her to break, to cry, to scream. That was their game, to watch hope turn into despair. The alien woman closed her eyes, trying to block out their laughter. She whispered the words of an old song from her childhood, a melody her mother had once sung to her under the peaceful stars of their home. The song was soft, weak, almost lost under the roar of fire and the warriors' voices, but it gave her strength. She imagined cool rivers, quiet fields, and skies filled with gentle light. She held on to those images, even as the heat pressed against her. But deep inside, she felt a shadow of doubt. No one was coming for her. Her people were too far, too broken. The warriors had made sure of that. There was no rescue, no miracle waiting. The only ending here was fire. The warriors seemed to sense her despair. Their mocking grew louder. Some threw dust into the flames to make the fire leap higher, the sparks dancing dangerously close to her. Others stomped the ground in rhythm, creating a savage drumbeat. The alien woman felt her strength fade. Her arms ached from the chains. Her lungs burned from the smoke. Her eyes closed, and she whispered again, but the words of the song faltered. She was slipping away, and the fire seemed to grow brighter, hungrier. Unseen by the warriors, however, Another pair of eyes watched from the shadows of the rocky cliffs near the camp. A figure crouched low, blending into the jagged stones, his breath steady, his gaze sharp. It was a human soldier. His armor was battered, his uniform torn, but his spirit was unbroken. He had been separated from his unit during the earlier battle, left for dead after the enemy's ambush. While others might have fled, he had stayed, drawn by the cruel noise of the camp and the sight of the flames. He saw the alien woman hanging above the fire, saw the warriors mocking her suffering, and something deep inside him stirred. Humans had only recently stepped into the wider galaxy, and many races saw them as small, fragile, or unworthy of respect. But this soldier knew the truth. Humans were stubborn, fierce, and unwilling to let cruelty stand unchallenged. His hands tightened around the worn blade at his side. He had no great weapon, no army, no reinforcements. But he had determination. He had the fire of his own spirit. From his hiding place, he studied the camp, the numbers of the warriors, the weapons they carried, the path to the flames. He knew the risks. Charging into a camp filled with warriors was madness, but leaving her to die in the fire was something he could not accept. The alien woman opened her eyes again, coughing from the smoke. Through the blur of heat and tears, she thought she saw movement beyond the flames, a shadow, a figure standing against the red sky. For a brief moment, hope flickered in her chest, but she told herself it was just her imagination, a final dream before the fire claimed her. Still, the figure did not fade. It stood taller, stronger, and she felt the faint spark of something she had almost forgotten: belief. The warriors shouted, louder, preparing for their cruel finale. But in the darkness beyond the firelight, the human soldier prepared to move. And though neither he nor the alien woman knew what would come next, the galaxy was about to witness a story that would be told for generations. A story of defiance, of courage, and of a human who would step out of nowhere to challenge the flames. The fire crackled and spat sparks into the air, each ember dancing up like a tiny spirit before fading into the smoky night sky. The alien woman hung weakly from the chains, her body trembling, her voice too faint to fight against the warriors' chants. The circle of cruel faces around her blurred from smoke and heat, their horns and jagged armor glowing red in the reflection of the flames. She thought it was the end. But far beyond the campfire's glow, in the jagged shadows of the cliffs, the human soldier crouched like a hunting wolf. His eyes never left her. He had seen terrible things in battles before, but something about this moment struck him differently. It was not just war. It was cruelty. Cruelty meant to break spirit rather than win ground, and he could not allow that. The human's name was Marcus Hale, though the galaxy knew him only as another soldier from a young and underestimated race. His boots were covered in ash, his armor dented, his weapons nearly gone. Yet as he crouched there, staring at the alien woman hanging above the flames, he felt the old fire of humanity rise inside him, the refusal to give up, the instinct to fight back even when the odds were impossible. He thought about his unit, scattered in the last ambush. He thought about how the enemy had laughed, calling humans weak and fragile. And he thought about his home far away on Earth, where people had once fought through forests, deserts, oceans, and storms with nothing but willpower. No, Marcus muttered under his breath. Not like this, not tonight. The alien woman opened her eyes again, weak and blurry from smoke. Through the haze, she thought she saw something, a shape moving beyond the firelight. She blinked, unsure if it was real or just a dream in her fading mind. But she felt something stir in her chest, a faint spark of hope. Marcus studied the camp. There were at least 20 warriors, maybe more. They were tall, broad, and armored with thick, jagged plates. They carried long spears that glowed faintly. with power and heavy blades that had already tasted battle. By logic, he had no chance. But humans were never famous for following logic when hearts and lives were at stake. Slowly, Marcus adjusted the strap of his torn armor. His blade, just a simple steel sword taken from the ruins of the battlefield, rested at his side. He had no shield, no energy rifle, no reinforcements, but what he did have was surprise, speed, and the determination to make every move count. He waited as the warriors roared louder, clapping their hands together, stamping their boots against the dirt. The rhythm of their chant grew stronger, echoing through the valley like the beat of war drums. Then Marcus moved. Silent as shadow, he slipped down the cliff, keeping low among the rocks. The warriors were too busy cheering their cruel spectacle to notice him. Step by step, he drew closer to the edge of the firelight, his eyes fixed on the woman above the flames. She saw him now. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her, but as he drew nearer, his figure sharpened. She recognized his shape. Not one of the horned warriors, but smaller, lighter, moving with strange quickness. A human. Her people had heard of humans before, newcomers to the galaxy, dismissed as fragile, their world still considered young. Many of the older races had laughed at them. But here one stood, right in the heart of the enemy's camp, and his eyes blazed with something fierce. The woman's breath caught. She wanted to call out, but she bit down on her fear. If she drew attention to him, the warriors would crush him before he could act. So she stayed silent, her eyes watching, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and wonder. Marcus crouched just outside the ring of firelight, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. The heat of the flames licked his face, but he ignored it. He studied the warriors. Most of them stood with their backs to him, their attention locked on the woman. This was his chance. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself. He knew once he stepped forward, there would be no going back. He would either save her or die beside her. And for Marcus Hale, both choices were better than doing nothing. The woman's eyes locked onto his, and though they had never met, she understood his decision. In her chest, the spark of hope grew brighter. Marcus tightened his grip on his blade. His body was tired, his wounds from the earlier fight still ached, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that the warriors thought he was weak, thought humans were nothing. Tonight, he would show them otherwise. The chanting reached its peak. The warrior leader, taller than the rest, raised his massive spear high above his head. The crowd roared, the fire crackled higher, and the woman closed her eyes, bracing herself for the end. Marcus moved. He burst from the shadows like a storm breaking free. His boots pounded against the dirt, his sword gleaming in the firelight. For a heartbeat, the warriors froze in shock. Then one shouted in alarm, pointing, "A human?" Before they could react, Marcus struck. He drove his blade into the nearest warrior's side, ripping through the weak point in the armor. The warrior fell with a heavy crash, and Marcus yanked, the blade free, already turning for the next. The camp erupted in chaos. Warriors shouted, their chant broken. Some scrambled for weapons, others charged forward. The firelight flickered wildly as Marcus weaved through them, his sword flashing, his body moving with desperate speed. The alien woman's eyes widened. She had expected him to be cut down instantly, but instead he moved like a storm of steel. He ducked under a spear, spun around, and struck down another warrior. His attacks were not just skill, they were pure willpower, each strike fueled by fury and determination. The warriors roared in rage, but Marcus did not falter. With every breath he drew closer to the woman. His heart pounded, his lungs burned, but he pressed forward. The woman, watching him fight, felt her despair shatter. This stranger, this human, was risking everything for her. She had thought herself forgotten, abandoned to the flames. Yet here he was, standing where no one else dared to stand. and for the first time since her capture, she believed she might survive. Marcus cut down another warrior, the firelight gleaming on his blade. The enemy's numbers pressed around him, but his spirit burned hotter than their fire. He shouted as he fought, a raw cry that carried across the camp. It was not just the cry of one man, it was the voice of his people, the voice of humanity's defiance. The alien woman, still hanging, above the flames, whispered to herself, "He came, out of nowhere." And in her voice was awe. The fire roared like a hungry beast beneath her, sparks flying into the night. The alien woman twisted weakly against her chains, her body trembling from heat and exhaustion. Around her the warriors shouted in confusion, their chants broken, their rhythms shattered, and in the middle of their camp, a single human fought like a storm. Marcus Hale swung his blade with fierce precision, every strike fueled not only by strength, but by will. He had no shield to protect him, no advanced weapons to match the enemy's spears, yet his movements cut through the air with startling sharpness. The warriors had mocked him at first, thinking one man could never challenge them. But their laughter had turned into shouts of anger and alarm. "Strike him down!" one bellowed, lunging forward. Marcus spun aside, the spear's tip slicing past his arm. He countered instantly, driving his blade into the enemy's side where the armor bent. The warrior collapsed with a heavy crash, sparks from the fire flickering against his jagged plates. The alien woman's eyes widened as she watched. She had expected the human to be overrun, crushed beneath the weight of numbers. Yet he fought with the ferocity of a cornered wolf, moving faster than she thought possible. Each time a warrior raised a weapon, Marcus seemed to be there first. Striking, dodging, surviving. Still, there were too many. For every warrior that fell, two more pressed forward. The circle around Marcus tightened, blades flashing in the firelight. The roar of battle drowned out the crackling flames. Marcus's breath came heavy. His body screamed in pain, his wounds from the earlier fight aching. But he ignored it. His eyes locked on the woman above the fire. She was his goal. Nothing else mattered. He pressed forward, cutting through the line of warriors like a hammer, breaking stone. His boots stamped into the dirt, his sword gleaming. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal. At last, Marcus reached the center of the camp, the base of the metal post where the chains held her above the flames. The fire's heat pressed against him, burning his skin. But he did not stop. The alien woman looked down at him, her voice breaking with shock. "You came." Marcus glanced up for only a heartbeat, his face streaked with ash and sweat. "I'm not leaving you here." Before she could reply, another warrior charged, roaring with fury. Marcus turned, swinging his blade with desperate speed. Steel met jagged armor, and the warrior fell, his weapon clattering to the ground. But more came. The alien woman cried out, her voice sharp with fear. "Behind you!" Marcus spun, barely raising his sword in time to block a heavy strike. The impact sent a jolt through his arms, nearly tearing the weapon from his grip. He gritted his teeth, pushing back with raw strength, and drove his boot into the warrior's chest, forcing him away. The flames roared higher, the smoke stinging his eyes. Marcus knew he had little time. If the heat didn't consume her, the warriors would. He had to act now. He leapt forward, raising his blade high, and slashed through the chain holding her left wrist. The metal snapped with a sharp clang, sending sparks flying. The woman gasped as her body shifted, the weight pulling unevenly on her remaining chain. Her legs dangled dangerously close to the flames, the heat searing her skin. "Hold on!" Marcus shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The warriors roared in rage, realizing his intent. They charged from all sides, weapons raised. Marcus turned, slashing again and again, fighting like a man possessed. He ducked under a spear, spun, and cut down another enemy. His breath came ragged, his body moving with the last reserves of his strength. The alien woman reached out with her free hand, her voice desperate. "You can't fight them all!" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't need to fight them all. I just need to fight long enough." With a final cry, he raised his blade and struck the second chain. It shattered, and the woman fell. Marcus dropped his sword and caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected, her body trembling with exhaustion. He pulled her close, shielding her from the fire's heat as he staggered back. The warriors roared, their chants now turned into a storm of fury. Marcus lifted his sword again, holding the woman steady with one arm. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. The woman stared at him in awe. This human, this stranger, had risked everything to pull her from the flames. She could hardly believe he stood there, battered and bloodied, yet still ready to face the entire camp. The warriors closed in, forming a tight ring around them. Their horns gleamed in the firelight, their weapons raised high. They were ready to crush him, to make him pay for every warrior he had struck down. Marcus tightened his grip on his sword. His chest rose and fell heavily, but his eyes blazed with unbroken fire. The woman, though weak, felt something stir inside her. She had thought her voice silenced forever, her spirit broken by flames. But seeing this human stand against the impossible, she found strength again. "You're not alone," she whispered. Her words gave Marcus a final spark of energy. He planted his boots firmly in the dirt, raising his blade high. The warriors roared, the fire blazed, and the air filled with the sound of battle waiting to break. For one heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. A lone human, battered but unbroken, stood against a circle of enemies with only a rescued stranger at his side. And then, with a cry that shook the camp, Marcus charged forward into the ring of warriors, his sword flashing once more. The battle for escape had begun. The camp was chaos. Warriors shouted over the roar of flames, their chants broken into snarls of rage. Sparks rained into the night air, glowing against the red sky. The fire pit that was meant to burn the alien woman now lit the humans' defiance. Marcus. Hale gripped his sword tightly, the alien woman leaning against him, weak but alive. Around them, the circle of warriors pressed closer, their jagged armor glinting in the firelight. The alien woman's legs trembled. The heat had drained her strength, and her breath came in sharp, painful gasps. Yet she forced herself to stay upright. She would not be a burden to the human who had risked everything to save her. Marcus scanned the camp quickly. Too many enemies. Too few options. The canyon lay to the east, its cliffs jagged and sharp, and beyond it, maybe, was safety. But to reach it, they would have to cut through the enemy lines. One warrior roared and lunged forward with his spear. Marcus swung his blade with desperate speed, deflecting the blow. The impact rattled through his arms, but he forced his strength into a counterstrike, slashing across the warrior's chest and sending him crashing to the dirt. The alien woman cried out, "There! Toward the canyon!" She pointed weakly with a trembling hand. Marcus nodded. "Stay close." With a cry, he charged toward the gap she had spotted, dragging her with him. The warriors surged to block their path, spears flashing. Marcus ducked low, pulling her down, with him as one spear shot overhead. He slashed upward, catching the warrior's arm and forcing him back. Step by step, they forced their way through. The heat of the fire pressed at their backs, the smoke stinging their eyes. Warriors shouted, their boots thundering against the dirt. Marcus moved with raw determination. His blade struck, blocked, and struck again. His body screamed in exhaustion, but he pushed forward. The alien woman stumbled often, but Marcus steadied her each time, refusing to let her fall. They burst through the first line of warriors, racing into the outer part of the camp. Tents burned, weapons clattered, and shadows leapt in the firelight. But the warriors were relentless. Horns sounded, echoing across the valley. More enemies rushed from every side, their cries filled with fury. Marcus cursed under his breath. "They won't stop!" The alien woman gritted her teeth. Her body was weak, but her spirit was no longer broken. She looked around quickly, spotting a narrow path between two burning wagons. "There! This way!" Together they ran through the gap, Marcus cutting down another warrior who blocked their path. Sparks fell around them like burning rain, the fire spreading wildly through the camp. For a moment, the flames became their shield. Smoke and heat forced the enemy back, giving Marcus and the woman a brief path of escape. They stumbled through, the haze coughing, their lungs burning. At last they broke free of the camp, racing toward the rocky ground beyond. The canyon loomed ahead, its jagged cliffs sharp against the night sky, but behind them, the thunder of boots grew louder. The warriors were chasing, their roars echoing like beasts in the dark. Marcus slowed for a moment, his chest heaving. He glanced back. Dozens of them, maybe more. His jaw tightened. They would not escape easily. The alien woman looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. "They'll catch us." Marcus shook his head firmly. "Not if I can help it." He grabbed a fallen spear from the ground, snapped off its burning tip, and tossed it aside. Then he shoved the broken pole into a crack between two rocks, wedging it tightly. When the warriors drew near, he pulled hard, sending the rocks tumbling down. A small landslide crashed behind them, blocking part of the path. Dust and debris filled the air, forcing the warriors to slow. "Go!" Marcus shouted, pulling the woman forward. They stumbled across the rocky ground, heading for the canyon. The ground was uneven, jagged stones cutting into their boots, but they pressed on. The woman gasped for breath, her body near collapse. Why are you doing this?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Because someone had to." Her heart tightened at his words. In his eyes, she saw no thought of reward, no demand for thanks, only determination. She realized then that this was what made humans different. Not strength of body, but strength of spirit. The canyon grew closer, its shadows deep and cold compared to the firelit camp. But the warriors were still behind them, climbing over the fallen rocks, their shouts growing nearer again. Marcus knew they couldn't outrun them forever. At some point, they would have to fight. As they reached the edge of the canyon, the ground dropped into a steep slope of jagged stone. Marcus paused, pulling the woman close to steady her. "Can you climb?" he asked. She looked at the cliff, then back at him. Her body was weak, but her voice was steady. "I will try." Marcus nodded. "I'll cover you. Don't stop until you reach the top." The warriors burst into view behind them, roaring as they spotted their prey. Spears and blades gleamed in the faint light. The alien woman grabbed the rocks, pulling herself upward with trembling arms. Every movement was slow, painful, but she pushed herself onward. Marcus turned to face the enemy. He planted his boots firmly, raised his sword, and drew a deep breath. The warriors charged. Marcus fought with the last of his strength, his blade flashing in the dark. He blocked, struck, and pushed them back, his body moving with desperate speed. His cry echoed across the canyon, defiant against the enemy's roars. The woman climbed higher, her hands shaking, her arms aching, but she refused to stop. She looked down once, seeing Marcus standing alone against the horde. Her heart clenched with fear. "Please, hold on," she whispered. At last, Marcus spotted her reaching a ledge near the top. Relief filled him, though his body staggered under the weight of battle. "Keep going!" he shouted. The warriors pressed closer, their numbers overwhelming. Marcus swung wildly, forcing them back for one more moment. Then, with a final glance at the woman above, he turned and leapt onto the slope himself, climbing with desperate speed. The warriors scrambled after him, their shouts echoing up the canyon walls. The climb was brutal. Stones cut his hands, his muscles screamed, but Marcus forced himself upward. He would not let her face this alone. At last, he reached her ledge. She reached out, grasping his arm, pulling him to safety. For a moment they collapsed together, their bodies trembling, their breaths ragged. Behind them, the warriors still climbed, their cries growing louder. The woman looked at Marcus, her eyes filled with both fear and wonder. "You won't stop, will you?" Marcus shook his head, his jaw set. "Not until you're safe." And together, side by side, they rose once more, ready to face whatever waited beyond the canyon's edge. The canyon wind howled through the rocks, sharp and cold against their scorched skin. Marcus Hale and the alien woman stood on a narrow ledge high above the camp. Below them, fires still burned, smoke curling upward into the night. Behind them, the jagged cliff stretched steep and endless. Ahead, the canyon fell away into darkness, and the warriors were coming. Their horns and armor gleamed in the faint light, their roars echoing like thunder as they climbed up the canyon walls. The sound of scraping claws and clattering weapons filled the night air. Dozens of them, maybe more, determined not to let their prey escape. The alien woman's chest rose and fell in sharp breaths. Her legs trembled from weakness, her arms scraped and raw from climbing. Yet she forced herself to stay standing, pressing her back against the cliffside. Her eyes darted to Marcus, who stood firm at the edge of the ledge, sword in hand. "They'll be on us in moments," she whispered. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He could see their glowing eyes drawing closer, their voices filling the canyon like a rising storm. He knew there was no way to outrun them anymore. The climb had drained their strength. The canyon offered no escape. "Then we hold," Marcus said simply. The woman's eyes widened. "Against all of them?" Marcus gave a small, grim smile. "We don't need to win. We just need to last." She stared at him, a strange feeling blooming in her chest. She had expected despair, fear, perhaps even surrender. Instead, this human, alone, wounded, exhausted, stood ready to fight an army, with nothing but a blade and sheer willpower, and somehow his courage gave her strength. The first warriors reached the ledge. Their armored boots slammed against the stone, their spears thrusting forward. Marcus moved instantly, slashing in a wide arc. His blade caught one across the chest, sending him tumbling into the darkness below. Another lunged, but Marcus twisted. Aside, the spear scraping sparks off the rock wall, before driving his sword into the gap of armor. The alien woman gasped as the warrior fell, but Marcus was already turning to face the next. His movements were ragged now, less precise than before, but filled with unbroken determination. Each strike carried the weight of survival, the raw instinct of a human refusing to fall. More warriors climbed up, their roars deafening. The ledge grew crowded with flashing weapons and clashing armor. Marcus fought desperately, his sword a blur of steel in the dark. But even as he fought, the woman realized he could not stand alone. If he fell, everything would end. Her hands trembled, her body weak, yet deep inside she felt something stir, an echo of her people's ancient power. Her race had never been warriors, but they carried within them the gift of energy, a connection to the living flow of the universe. She had not used it in years, her life once devoted to peace. But now, with death upon them, the gift awakened. She closed her eyes, forcing her shaking hands forward. A faint glow sparked between her palms, weak at first, then growing brighter. The air shimmered as a barrier of energy formed before her, pushing back against the spears that aimed for Marcus's side. Marcus blinked in surprise, then gave her the quickest nod. Good timing. The woman's legs buckled, her body nearly collapsing under the effort. But she pushed on. Her barrier held for precious moments, giving Marcus the space he needed to strike again. Together they fought, not as warrior and victim, but as two souls standing against the tide. The warriors snarled in frustration, their weapons clanging uselessly against the shimmering barrier. Marcus seized the opening, cutting down two more before stepping back to guard the woman as she gathered her strength. "You're stronger than you think," Marcus said quickly, his voice calm even in the storm. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since her capture, she believed it. The battle raged on. Warriors climbed higher, their numbers endless. Marcus's blade grew heavy, his arms screaming in pain, but he refused to drop it. The woman's barrier flickered, dimmed, then flared again as she poured the last of her spirit into it. The canyon rang with cries, with the clash of steel and the hum of energy. At one point, a warrior broke through, raising his massive axe high. Marcus lunged forward, but he knew he was too far. The weapon would fall before he could reach her. The alien woman did not hesitate. With a cry, she thrust, her hands forward, sending a surge of energy outward. The force blasted the warrior back, hurling him from the ledge into the abyss below. Her chest heaved, her body shaking violently from the effort. She nearly collapsed, but Marcus caught her with one arm, holding her steady. "You saved me," he said. She looked at him weakly, a faint smile on her lips. "No, we saved each other." The warriors hesitated now. Their chants faltered, their eyes flicking between the human's unyielding stance and the alien woman's sudden burst of power. The sight of the two standing side by side, fire and energy blazing together, gave them pause. Marcus lifted his sword once more, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Come on, then. Who's next?" The canyon fell into silence for a breath. The warriors growled, but none stepped forward immediately. The moment stretched, heavy with tension. Then, from the distance, the faint sound of horns echoed. Not the enemies, but a different tone, one the woman recognized. Her eyes widened. "My people, and yours, they're coming." Marcus exhaled, relief mixing with disbelief. Against all odds, reinforcements had followed their trail. The sound of approaching allies grew louder, their cries rising from the far side of the canyon. The warriors snarled in frustration. Their chance to crush the human and the woman had slipped away. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to retreat, fading, back into the darkness, their roars echoing with anger. Marcus lowered his sword at last, his body trembling. He leaned back against the rock wall, pulling the woman gently down beside him. They sat together, both too exhausted to speak for a moment. The fires burned below. The canyon winds carried the sounds of battle fading away. And above them, the stars shone faintly through the smoke. Finally, the woman whispered, "You would have fought to the end, wouldn't you?" Marcus looked at her, his face calm despite his exhaustion. "That's what humans do." She smiled weakly, her heart filled with something new. Hope. And together, side by side, they waited as the sound of their allies drew closer, the night carrying with it the promise of survival. The night air was heavy with smoke and dust. Marcus Hale sat against the canyon wall, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Beside him, the alien woman leaned weakly, her body trembling from exhaustion, but her spirit no longer broken. The sound of horns grew louder, clear, strong, and full of promise. It was not the enemy's cruel chant. It was the call of rescue. From the far side of the canyon, lights appeared, torches, lanterns, and the faint glow of energy weapons. Figures emerged through the haze. The woman's people, robed and shining with their own soft light, and behind them, the worn but steady soldiers of Earth, carrying their battered banners. The alien woman's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since her capture, she saw her people alive, unbroken. Their scouts must have followed the trail, refusing to abandon her. She whispered softly, "They came." Marcus gave a tired smile. "Told you we just had to last." The reinforcements rushed toward them, their voices echoing with relief and determination. The enemy warriors, seeing the combined strength, approaching, roared in frustration. But even their fury could not match the tide now turning. Their leader raised his horned helmet, gave a final growl, and signaled retreat. One by one, the warriors vanished into the shadows of the canyon, their boots pounding into the distance, their defeat heavy in the air. The fires in the camp below smoldered, their smoke drifting upward as if mourning their lost victory. The human and alien forces reached Marcus and the woman at last. Hands pulled them gently to their feet, supporting their weary bodies. The woman's people bowed their heads in gratitude, whispering words of blessing. The human soldiers clapped Marcus on the shoulder, pride burning in their eyes. "You're alive," one of them said. "We thought you were gone." Marcus shook his head, his voice rough but steady. "Not yet." The alien woman stood close beside him, her hand brushing against his arm for balance. She looked up at him, her voice filled with awe. "You saved me. You faced them all for me." Marcus glanced at her, his eyes tired but shining with quiet fire. "I couldn't just watch. That's not what we do." Her heart tightened. She had seen her people broken, scattered, ready to surrender. Yet this one human had stood alone against the impossible, not for glory or reward, but simply because he refused to let cruelty win. The leaders of both groups stepped forward. The alien, elders in their silver robes, and the human captain with his scarred armor. They looked at Marcus and the woman, then at each other. "What happened here will not be forgotten," the captain said firmly. The elder nodded. "This night has shown us what we doubted. Humanity carries a fire inside them, a fire no enemy can put out." The woman's voice rose, soft but clear. "That fire saved me. When I had lost hope, it gave me strength again." The elders bowed their heads in respect, and even the human soldiers stood straighter, hearing the weight of her words. Together they left the canyon, moving back toward the safety of their camps. Marcus walked slowly, his body heavy, but the woman stayed at his side, her steps small but steady. As dawn broke, the red sky softened into pale light. The smoke cleared, and the first stars faded above. The battlefield looked less like ruin and more like a place where something new had been born. In the days that followed, the story spread. First among the woman's people, whispered as a song of survival. Then among the human soldiers, told around fires as a tale of defiance. Soon it reached every corner of the Allied worlds. They told of a human soldier who came out of nowhere, who faced the flames and the horde, and who would not let hope die. And they told of the alien woman who found her strength again, who stood beside him when all seemed lost, and who carried his courage into her people's hearts. For Marcus, the fame meant little. He returned to his unit, repaired his armor, and prepared for the next battle. To him, what he had done was simple. A life had been in danger, and he had acted. That was enough. But for the woman, everything had changed. She no longer saw herself as helpless, no longer believed her people were doomed to silence. She had witnessed the fire of humanity, and she carried it with her. One evening, as the two stood at the edge of the camp watching the stars, she spoke softly. "You could have left me. You could have saved yourself. But you didn't." Marcus shrugged, lightly. "Didn't feel right." She smiled, her voice filled with quiet strength. "Because of you, I know now. Our people are not alone. Together we can face anything." He looked at her, the corner of his mouth lifting into a small smile. "Together, then." The wind carried their words into the night sky, across the stars as if promising the galaxy that something greater had begun. And so the legend was born, not of a human or an alien alone, but of two souls who, in the darkest hour, lit a fire that would never fade.